When talking about future talents in F1, the two obvious choices are Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. They've been fighting each other since their karting days and have continued that rivalry into F1. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on Charles by going through his career, talking about some of the critical moments that have allowed him to develop into such a great talent, and also explain the secrets to his driving style and what makes him so fast. But before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. It only takes 5 seconds of your time and it does us a massive favour by allowing us to grow so we can keep bringing you more F1 content. Before going into his driving career, I just want to highlight a couple of the off-track experiences that are very important for him. He lost his great friend and mentor Jules Bianchi in 2015, as I'm sure you all know, as well as his father during his F2 campaign in 2017. He clearly has incredible mental strength to continue performing at such a high level after what must have been a traumatic experience for him. It's clearly something that he carries with him to this day and acts as extra motivation to do them proud. After narrowly winning the GP3 title in 2016, it was in 2017 where Charles really had his big breakout year. He dominated the whole F2 season, taking 8 pole positions and 7 wins, scoring 282 points. The standout performance came in the Bahrain sprint race, where he displayed his tremendous racecraft, making some outrageous moves to take a remarkable win. It had Lewis Hamilton Turkey 2006 vibes to it. Everyone was in awe of what they'd just seen. Although he did have fresher tyres than his competition, it still took a great deal of maturity and talent to make his strategy work. This was the first glimpse of the Charles Leclerc we've come to know in F1. The field itself was very strong overall, with a good mix of experience and rookie talents. Oliver Rowland and Artem Markelov were his two main title contenders, and we also had 2019 champion Nick de Vries and Alex Albon as two of the other rookie standouts. If we take a look at his performance against Albon, pace-wise it looks very similar to what Max achieved against him. I know they weren't driving for the same team, but as it's a spec series, I feel it's an extremely valid comparison to make, and it's one that puts Charles Leclerc in the same bracket as Max Verstappen in terms of talent. As we all know, he joined Sauber in 2018 for his debut F1 season. Initially, for the first 3 or so races, it wasn't going entirely to plan. If anything, he lacked a bit of pace compared to his teammate Ericsson, and in general was struggling to get the most out of the car. He made some odd mistakes in Bahrain, spinning out on his qualifying lap, and another random spin in China, showing he wasn't at ease with the bigger, faster cars. From Baku onwards, however, it was a different story. He managed a standout P6 for Sauber, which was their best result since the 2015 Russian Grand Prix. This was the same team that had scored just 7 points over the previous 2 seasons, and he'd managed to get 8 in one race. From this point onwards, he outqualified Ericsson 16 times to 2, on average by around 6 to 7 tenths. A couple of his best performances were in France, where he got into Q3 for the first time with this outstanding lap, and in Brazil, where he showed great judgment to stay out on a track which was getting wetter and wetter by the second to improve his time. He earned himself the right to be called a one-lap specialist, something which has been even more evident at Ferrari. Something I'd like to point out, which was a big factor in his improvement, is his adaptability. He stated that his natural style that he used in F2 and GP3 was with an oversteery car, and that was the best way for him to extract lap time. He tried the same in F1 at the beginning, but it made the car too unpredictable and difficult to drive. After he changed to a more understeery balance, he got rid of those issues and managed to get the most out of the car. This shows that no matter what type of car you give him, he's willing to adapt his style and setup to get the most out of it. It's a trait of champions of the past such as Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. Now on to Ferrari. It's a completely different kettle of fish to what he's experienced before, with all the added pressure and expectation. We could all see his speed from the get-go, but it wasn't coming together for both driver or team for the first part of the season. Charles also made a few mistakes, like in Baku, but so did the team in Monaco, for instance, with that blunder in qualifying, which ultimately forced Charles to be overly aggressive in the race. In the first 7 rounds of the season, he'd only out-qualified Vettel once, in Bahrain by 0.3 of a second. France was the turning point, citing changes in his approach on a Saturday as the key. He went on a rampage in qualifying, beating Vettel 10-3 till the end of the season, on average by around 0.2. The height of that came from France to Russia, where he went on a 9-race streak against Vettel in quali and averaging a half-second gap to his teammate. The races were a lot closer. Charles still outscored Seb but lost the race head-to-head. This is to be expected since it was only his second year in F1, and with limited testing in the modern era, every bit of experience counts. His main issue was tyre management. Think about Austria, where he ran out of tyre life late on, so had to relinquish the lead to Verstappen on fresh tyres, or in Belgium, where he almost suffered the same fate against Hamilton. It was clear this was a weak point to work on. What was also evident was his insane ability in wheel-to-wheel combat. After a bit of a wake-up call in Austria, he had a titanic scrap with Max in Silverstone, making life hell for the Dutchman and finally exerting his revenge. The most famous one was in Monza, with Lewis not cracking to the pressure of having a multiple world champion hounding your gearbox and holding on for a legendary win in front of the Tifosi. It goes back to that race in Bahrain in F2, or even before. That ability in wheel-to-wheel combat is what separates the merely good drivers from the all-time greats. In 2020 we saw a more polished driver all round, although he still is prone to the odd error. I'm sure that will iron out over time, as we've seen pretty much with every driver in the past. His qualifying against Vettel was extraordinary, 13-4 with an average gap of over 0.4 of a second. It seems he's managed to carry over that form from the 9-race streak in 2019 to the entire season, which can probably be put down to him having that extra year with the team. His race performance were also far superior to Seb, and according to the man himself and Pirelli boss Mario Isola, that can be put down to his tyre management, which he claims to be as good as Lewis and Max. The best example of this would be at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, where he somehow managed P4 in his Ferrari by miraculously pulling off a one-stop strategy at an extremely high-deg Silverstone. Nobody else had the audacity to even try. Although the performance of his Ferrari was not on par with the McLarens, Renaults or Racing Points, he was fighting with them regularly and often outqualified the lot. He outscored Lando Norris, Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon, who had far superior machinery to him. When talking about drivers of the season, Charles Leclerc gets overlooked quite a lot compared to Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and even Danny Rick and Checo Perez. What he's done with that car is outrageous and deserves every bit of praise it gets. The fact he finished within 10 points of Carlos Sainz's McLaren should be a cause for concern for the Spaniard. Who knows what's going to happen to him in the same car as Charles? One final comparison I'd like to make is with Daniel Ricciardo in 2014. both faced Vettel in their third season in F1 in very similar circumstances. As you can see, in qualifying, the advantage Charles had was much larger, by almost 0.2 of a second. In terms of percent of points scored, Charles also trumps him. If you look at Max and Daniel, Max had a very similar, albeit slightly smaller advantage over Daniel on pace, as Charles in theory should have, which shows the level he's driving on. Perhaps he's even faster than Max over one lap. Comparing to Lewis is much longer, but the end result is pretty much that they're a carbon copy of one another. So having comparable talent to an already 7 times world champion will give Charles hope for the future, and once he has the tools to fight for the title, he will deliver. The only thing I can think of which may hold him back is Ferrari, and how long it's going to take them to recover from their slump. All in all, he's a special talent, so even if Ferrari don't deliver the goods, there will be other teams to go to, so no need to worry too much. In terms of his driving style, as I've said already, he's a carbon copy of Hamilton. Both have this incredible feeling on the brakes that not only allows them to make outrageous overtakes, something we saw more from Hamilton at McLaren, but we've also seen quite a lot of at Mercedes, but also in clear air on a qualifying lap, it gives them that extra edge of speed which no one else on the grid has. They both like to brake quite late into corners and square them off more, keeping what's known as a flat car, but also not lose any time on exits. This is where all their time is gained, and that's the hardest skill of all. So as we've seen, Charles possesses traits of many champions of the past, from ferocious speed to great racecraft, great race management. He seems to have it all. He's also positioned himself well within his team. Well, he's the top dog at Ferrari. That's as good as it gets for a racing driver. So where would I rank him on the current grid? Probably third behind Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. I know I've said that he could potentially be quicker than Max, but because Max has more experience than him, he's ironed out those mistakes. He has that extra bit of consistency that Charles doesn't yet have. And Lewis, of course, I've said they have very similar driving styles, but Hamilton's been in the sport since 2007. He has so much more experience than Charles. I don't think it's fair to directly compare the two in terms of overall ability. Where would you rank Charles Leclerc on the current grid? Please let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you may have learnt a thing or two about Charles and why people think of him in such a high regard. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It takes less than 5 seconds and we'd really appreciate it if you did. Thank you for watching and take care.